Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It's Monday, November 27th. Derek Van Riper, Eno Saris, back from the tryptophan tireds of Thanksgiving weekend. You still got leftovers left, Eno?
Just a tiny bit. Made a couple sandwiches, had a bunch of turkey soup. Just a little bit left. The doggies, we put some chicken in for the broth, and then it's not so suitable for humans. The dogs are still eating on that turkey. So we had a great time. I learned a couple things. I don't think I'm gonna buy a butterball turkey next year. I bought a butterball turkey and then dry brined it. And they if Reddit is to be believed, and yes, there are of course Reddits about these sort of things. If Reddit is to be believed, you can dry brine a butterball. However, it is filled with salt water basically to A, make it juicier, and B, perhaps sell it at a heavier price.
Yes. Gaming the system a little bit there.
So I did, after our last podcast, have a little freak out because I thought I had a 21-pound turkey that was still in the freezer on Tuesday, was it?
You asked me on Tuesday afternoon. It was about 3 o'clock my time, and you said, when should I take the turkey out of the freezer? It's like 21 pounds. I just looked at you, and it was like, I don't know, like 4 days ago. We looked it up. And it was like,
we Googled it. It said it takes 6 days to thaw. And I was like, oh no! I immediately closed the computer and ran.
Well, there is a hack that I found this year. It was the first time we ever made Thanksgiving at my house, because usually we go to either my parents or Steph's parents. We come to your house when we lived in California. It was very kind of you and your family to include us a couple of years ago when we were there. And so we actually had to make our own turkey, but we kind of realized that last minute, and in fear of not having a full bird that was ready, one of the grocery stores here actually lets you buy whatever combination of turkey parts that you want. So we bought a couple breasts, couple thighs, couple legs, couple wings, and probably paid more per pound. I know you can basically get the turkey for free if you buy all the other stuff and do it, whatever grocery store hacks are out there, but it made the prep a lot easier. It also made it easier for us to buy a smaller amount of turkey for the group that we had. So I hope everybody out there enjoyed the holiday. The last thing we had was stuffing. I made way too much stuffing. So we had that left over still as of Monday. But everything else turned out great. Homemade cranberries. That was my discovery of the year. It makes all the difference in the world. I've never been a fan of the gelatinous canned stuff. But if you make your own and you get some green apples in there, some Granny Smith apples, a little bit of orange juice, turns out real nice. So
nice.
Big
also,
recommendation.
Taking the stuffing and throwing it in your soup is pretty good, because you get all that taste, and then it kind of softens and stuff, and it's a different approach. One piece of advice for anybody listening: do not spatchcock in front of the family.
Oh, come on, man! You didn't know that was going to be traumatic for the children?
Oh, yes. Calvin was like, "What are you doing?" It's like, "I'm spatchcocking." He's like, "That is so gross. I'm not eating that." I'm like, "Well, no, you're not eating this neck that I'm pulling out of the bird, and don't listen while I crack its breastbone."
Yeah. That was the other big tip of the year that people have been throwing out for a few years now. That's definitely, if you can do it, it's a good way to prepare the bird if you're doing the whole bird. So for the rest of your turkey tips, consult the appropriate subreddit. We will reserve turkey tips for next year.
You saw me. I texted. Did you see the text, the tweet I sent back at you? Me passed out on the ground.
Yeah. You're just done.
Baby.
I mean,
I'd started
there with a LaCroix
at like 8. I was done on a lot of different levels.
I have increased respect every year for everyone that's ever prepared Thanksgiving dinners, because the more I have to do, the more I realize it is a ton of
hard
work.
it is.
I was on dishes like all day. Like that was my role. I was cleaning up. My wife, my mother-in-law were kind of frantically putting all the stuff together, and I was just trying to keep the kitchen clean so the next dish could go in, because again, amateur hour, we didn't really know what we were doing. We're not one of those houses that has like 3 ovens like that. That would make things a little easier if you got the space, but we're not those people. So again, more turkey tips coming next November. You have that to look forward to next year. A couple things on this episode. First and foremost, if you have not subscribed to our YouTube page, you should do that. We'd really appreciate it. If you're already watching us on YouTube, be sure to hit the like button, barrel up on the like button on this video. And then, of course, the opposite spiel. If you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any platform that allows you to rate and review the podcast, we'd really appreciate it if you do that. It makes us feel good. It also makes our bosses happy, which, this time of year could be really good for us. So please take a moment, leave us a nice rating and review. Quick update about the show. Next week, we're in Nashville for the winter meetings. Nashville, one of my favorite cities to visit. So I'm excited that it's there this year, not in like Orlando or one of the other places they go that isn't quite as fun. 2 episodes coming out next week. Scheduling them for Tuesday and Thursday. That is written in pencil because who knows what will happen between now and then. If we need to release an episode on Monday, we'll do an episode on Monday. If we're going to do Monday, Tuesday, we'll do that instead. But 2 episodes coming next week from Nashville. So we're really excited about that. And it seems like things are moving along at a nice pace so far. Sonny Gray lands with the Cardinals. The Athletics' Ken Rosenthal has a report they'll have a deal hammered out later on Monday. We're seeing 3 years and $75 million. So the Cardinals have really rebuilt this rotation in the first month of the offseason, with Gray being the big addition and Lance Lynn and Kyle Gibson being their previous additions to sort of just fortify the back end with some innings. As far as Gray goes, I had a predictions episode with Will Salmon last week in the Athletic Baseball Show feed. I thought the Rangers might actually be the team that would swoop in on Gray, and that was with an assumption that Jordan Montgomery might go somewhere else. Who knows how that all plays out? Reason being, the Rangers have often shopped in the bucket in which I placed Sonny Gray, the oft-injured starter, the talented but oft-injured starter. 439 innings since the start of 2021. Similar to Blake Snell, actually, who's at 436 and 2/3, and that's 85 and a third less than Jordan Montgomery. So I just thought, given all the guys the Rangers have been adding over the years, this might be their fit. But instead, $25 million per to be probably the best starter in St. Louis by a healthy margin. So curious what you think about this move for Sonny Gray, getting out of Target Field and moving into Busch Stadium.
Yeah, recency bias is funny because before I looked at the rundown, I did not have Sonny Gray in the same sort of injury risk bucket as Blake Snell, but they're right there with each other, innings upon innings. Also, both coming off of 180 innings, although Sonny Gray's older, so you might expect just a little bit more risk there with the health. But I like him so much because he has an elite breaking ball. It's not the curveball anymore. I think it's the sweeper now, but in any case, he's a guy who can spin it. I think we've shown a little bit that guys who can spin it age a little bit better. And I think that's been shown in the research, but also just anecdotally, if you think of the Adam Wainwrights, Rich Hills, I think there's a lot of guys who over time have outperformed at the latter end of their careers. And usually I think elite breaking ball, The nice thing about Sonny Gray is his fastball's not quite in the Wainwright end of career status. I think he was like 92.8 this year. And that's below average for a starter these days, but it's not it's not where Wayno was like 87 the last couple of years. So it's not down there. And by Stuff Plus, his fastball still rates as above average. It's become a cut ride fastball now, which means that it has a little bit of cut to it. Everything he does has cut to it. He's kind of one of those guys. I just like that he's changed his pitches over time. He's added pitches. That's I think important. He has different pitches he can go to. If the sweeper gets overused, he kind of showed a little bit of that in the playoffs. Maybe he can go back to the curve some. His 2 fastball. I just think he's going to age well. And if you just take what's interesting to me also is if you take a step back and look at the shape of the offseason and what I thought might happen in the past, you kind of were waiting on the top guys to set the market. And then people could slot in and be like, okay, I'm not going to get the highest AAV. I'm not going to get this, but we need to know how much, dollar per win is. We need to know how much the top guy is going to go for. We need to see Yamamoto go, before Snell will sign, because Snell will sign for a little bit less. And then Sonny Gray signs for a little bit less. But I think what we're seeing is a little bit, I have this piece in my folder, ideas folder that I've never done, but it's titled, "Is it collusion if the robots did it?" And so basically I had this like moment of awakening when I looked at Sonny Gray. I just took his projection. I aged it a half a win over the next 2 years. So his projection is 3.3 wins on Steamer. And I aged it half a win, added it all together, and multiplied it by $9 million per win. And I got 75.
I think it's collusion if you program your robots all the same way.
I don't know. It's just kind of crazy. So in essence, if that's the deal, like everybody's just going to get at most 2 numbers to choose from. And I bet you if we could get Sonny Gray's agent on here and give him some truth serum, he'd be like, yeah, really early on, we realized 3 and 75 was the offer. And we had 3 and 75 from like 3 different teams, and he chose the Cardinals.
You should put agent truth serum in your ideas folder, because
that would be amazing.
Would be fantastic. I feel like I've had one interaction at the winter meetings. This is probably 10 years ago, with an agent who, on his own, gave himself truth serum and
alcohol.
got very loose-lipped about a bunch of stuff. Some of it was actually factually inaccurate, like verifiably. Like
that happens with alcohol.
I was like, these guys weren't actually drafted the same year, so you didn't pull that off. But yeah. I just found that fascinating because the amount of information that they're holding and that they've gathered over the years, it's
their perspective too. You know, like being pro-labor but not actually being labor themselves. And
right. Yeah, and I think at the time there was a player that this agent represented. He threw a number out for what he wanted for an extension, and I think I may have even said it out loud. I said, "That's not enough." It's like, you got to get more than that. And the player did get more than that. Had a better career than even his agent expected. We will hide. We'll hide all identities in this case, because that is a horrible game of guess who. But anyway,
this is part of why I love the winter meetings. By the way,
Yeah, and it's like that was a phase of life where I could stay up late enough to get that insight. I don't know. Don't know if I'm going to collect anything quite like that. I'll leave that to you. That'll be your wheelhouse.
We'll see. You know, even I've been not staying up as late. The latest I stayed up at some point, I was like having shots with like Bruce Bochy and Gary Sheffield.
Why? Again, winter meetings. There's no other situation.
I can't claim that like I had their attention and that I was there. Like, you know, we were best of buds, but like we were definitely sharing some liquids.
You were just adjacent to each of them. They were flanking you on the 2 sides, and yeah, just a coincidence. You looked around, you're like,
in the middle, like, wow. This is crazy.
Okay. 3 shots of Jameson.
Yeah, exactly.
As far as Sonny Gray goes, the early draft market has been pretty kind to him, I think, relative to recent seasons. Sonny Gray years ago would get the top 100 overall treatment in his early Oakland days, and I think ever since then, the combination of injuries that he's dealt with has always kind of held the price back, and it seems like I'm always in the down years. If Sonny Gray misses time, I believe in the skills. I think he's a good pitcher. I tend to invest. If Sonny Gray stays healthy like he just did in 2023, I'm a little less likely to pay the freight. So your would you rathers in this case, right around that pick 125 range among starters. You've got Gray versus Hunter Greene, Max Scherzer, Chris Bassett, and Jordan Montgomery. And I think it's really interesting because the last 2, Montgomery and Bassett, they're to me very similar in what they bring to the table. It's innings, a slightly lower K rate, volume is good, volume plays, but you
could be buying high on both those guys too.
You could be,
because you know when it comes to big innings, not as big stuff. You can have really great seasons. Like remember the Miles Michaelis season? It was like 2 seasons ago, or you know what I mean. And then you don't necessarily follow that up either.
Mm-hmm.
So I will tell you that I tend towards the Hunter Greene, Sonny Gray bucket, where I'm like, at least when they're pitching for me, I'm pretty sure they're going to be good, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas that does get me in trouble, because there's not a lot of innings in there. What I would like to tell myself going into drafts is get one of each bucket. Pair a Sonny Gray. If Hunter Greene goes first, take Sonny Gray second. And if Jordan Montgomery goes first, take Chris Bassett second, and come away hopefully with some innings and some upside. I don't know.
A question about Hunter Greene. The results just have not been good, right? The stuff is fantastic. It's easy to see it when you watch him. You see a K rate above 30% for a guy in his first 237 big league innings. We love to see that. The walk rate's a little high, but it's not atrocious. Like 9.3%, you can live with that. The park boosts home runs, and he's had a home run problem so far. Lost time is kind of cooked into these first two seasons, especially 2023. It kind of feels like you're buying a lot of improvement, even though you're getting a great strikeout floor if you're taking Sonny Gray, or if you're taking Hunter Greene, rather, where he's currently going.
Like you're paying for the improvement.
You're paying for a lot of improvement that we haven't seen yet.
He has to improve in order to be worth that number.
I mean, he has to improve by quite a bit, I think, to return full value around the pick 125 range.
I mean, even his like sort of standard projections, 4.25 ERA. That would be an improvement. It would be better than he's ever done. But it also wouldn't be amazing for right? That wouldn't be amazing for fantasy. The stuff plus projections have a 4 ERA. So
okay.
Now you're talking a little bit better. 4 ERA with 11 plus strikeouts per 9. Now that's what people are buying, and those are projections, which is supposedly a sober look at it, not just being like, but what if he really took off? But I understand your question, and I think I would have Gray above Greene just because he's demonstrated it, and it's not like either of them has demonstrated innings year after year.
Right. And I do think the big part of it is that we talk about home run rates all the time. And if that home run rate for Greene has been running a little on the high side, you can take a little bit of home run rate improvement. That could go a long way. Underlying skills otherwise being pretty solid. It's easy to see where the projections get some of that optimism from. But man, they got to be right if you're going to pay full freight again this year for Hunter Greene. Again, great strikeout floor. We got another move, though. The Tigers get in on the fun. Kenta Maeda is headed to Detroit. It's 2 years, $26 million. Kind of from the next tier down as far as expectations go. Similar injury concerns, though, to Sonny Gray. I would say in Maeda's case, a little scarier because he's a few years older and because it was an elbow surgery that kept him out more recently. Whereas Gray, it's kind of like back, hamstring, a lot of other stuff that isn't necessarily shoulder, elbow related.
And surgery, yeah.
Yeah, so you have that as sort of the extra concern. Now with Maeda, I think the fun part from a fantasy perspective is it's easier to stream him in Detroit. I know I saw our friend Todd Zola put out a tweet saying it was pretty much a neutral shift from Target Field to Comerica. I disagree with that a little bit just because of the home run park factors in particular. The huge improvement there. Comerica is the best park in baseball for a starting pitcher or for any pitcher to be in from a home run rate perspective. Target Field's kind of middle of the pack.
That's an issue for Maeda as his fastball has declined. You can see a little bit of an increase in the home run rate. He used to kind of sit, 0.9, 1.2, and last year was his tied for his highest ever 1.47 home runs per 9. I think that's tied mostly into the fastball decline. And that's happened in velo and shape and just over time with the surgeries. And it's interesting to me to see Sonny Gray had the third best fastball stuff plus of any free agent starter. And Kenta Maeda basically the worst. It's kind of hard because they, people have sinkers and fastballs. So like, which one am I counting? But in Kenta Maeda territory is Hyun-Jin Ryu, who threw 88 last year, and Zach Greinke, who also threw 88 last year. So, he's in a bad bucket when it comes to fastball stuff plus, and it's possible that fastball stuff plus should be valued higher than anything else because so much of the arsenal kind of comes away from the fastball. The best breaking ball you can throw is defined by what your fastball does. Your best changeup you can throw is defined by what your fastball does. The better the velo is on the fastball, the harder it is for people to adjust to the breaking ball and the changeup. So I think that's a big reason why you see such a big dollar difference between Gray and Maeda, because overall Stuff Plus actually favors Maeda because Stuff Plus loves his splitter. But if you just think about pitching, like if the fastball's 86 and the splitter's 80, like, is that going to work?
Yeah, you know? it puts a lot of pressure on locating really, really well. Yeah. But I do think the park offsets some of the potential catastrophic damage. At least
the risk was totally different. 2 and 24 is, you know, for the Tigers, the what they paid for it is totally different. You know, that's very different than 3 and 75. 2 and 24 is maybe it'll work out. If it doesn't, we got, you know, $12 million on our roster next year and that's not playing for us. You know, that happens to most teams at some point, and it mirrors, I think. You have this on the rundown, so I'm stealing this from you, but it mirrors the Giant signings, and we've got a former Giant manager pulling out the sort of Sean Manaea, Carlos Rodón. You know, maybe he's guaranteeing the second year, but a lot of these contracts have been 1 and 12 with an option for a second year. You know, this one he's just, okay, fine, I'll just give you the second year.
Yeah. 2 for 24, as you said, not the 2 for 26 that you see on the screen. Typo. EDVR, first one of November. Yeah, not even close to the first one.
It's very beautiful. I like the crayon.
It looks nice, but it's
incorrect.
Nice job. I do know the difference between a 4 and a 6. If anyone's concerned, I still understand there's difference in those two numbers.
Do you think this means anything? Like, do you think this means that Luis Severino gets a 2-year deal? Does he want a 2-year deal? Maybe Luis Severino's in a different package. He's like, I don't want the 2-year deal. I just want the 1-year deal, you know, and get back out there.
Yeah, this is where the age would factor in, right? If you're Maeda, you want the second guaranteed year because you're hitting that point in your career.
Could be the last deal.
Probably the last multi-year deal you're going to get. Severino being 29 years old right now. He turns 30 in February.
He wants to
probably hit the 4-year deal if he comes on a 1-year deal this year, crushes it somewhere, and then goes back into
tries to do like the Robbie Ray, Kevin Gossman deal where he like signs for a year, has a good year, and then gets the maybe even the 5 and 100, 5, 120, 111.
Yeah, so much about the interest level for me in Luis Severino, and it's probably true for many people, it's where he signs, right? If he ends up with one of our 4 to 6 orgs that we really, really trust with pitching, big thumbs up, 2 thumbs up, where everyone's going to like
Parks could really help too, I think. Like, you know, just everything, when you're in New York, everything is just a higher wire act. Like his fastball didn't drop that much velo. It didn't drop that much shape. Like by stuff, he should have been okay, but just being a little bit worse and being in New York and facing those offenses and having that outfield dimensions, I could see being interested in them, even though the Pittsburgh Pirates don't have like an amazing track record recently. They've been developing some guys. Keller's gotten better under their watch. Oviedo got a little bit better before, you know, some news on him. He has Tommy John, but like if he went to the Pirates, I think I'd be pretty optimistic about what he could do, just because the park factor would at least help him there. Like the Cardinals, the Giants, I would love for him to end up there. I would just be more interested because I think it would just give him a softer landing spot. He could be who he was last year in Pittsburgh, San Francisco, and St. Louis and be useful probably.
I think he'd at least be a home streamer for the most part if the stuff was as good as it was last year. I wonder what's going to happen with the Twins. Are they a possible candidate for signing Severino? Because right now, you know, with Gray gone, Maeda gone, I assume they're going to add someone for depth. It's Pablo Lopez, Joe Ryan, Bailey Ober, Chris Paddock, Louis Varland. You got Simeon Woods Richardson, probably
like post-surgery Paddock, and Louis Varland, who had been kind of in and out of the bullpen a little bit, and Simeon Woods Richardson himself. So, like, I would love to add Paddock, Varland, and Wood Richardson together and ask for like 180, 200 innings from the 3 of them.
So that means you need one more veteran to help chew up some innings and maybe one more to put in that top 3. It really depends on how you feel about Bailey Ober. If you trust Bailey Ober in a playoff series to be your 3rd starter, then it's maybe 2 depth arms.
For what it's worth, they did not start Joe Ryan in the playoffs, did they? Or they gave him like 2 innings or something?
Joe Ryan had an injury late in the year, if memory serves me right. I remember having to manage him.
He came back, though. Yeah, they gave him like a game 3 start where, you know, he He pitched
groin injury late in the year. Now he was pitching regular innings in September, so the injury wasn't holding him back in October.
They just didn't really trust him because of the home run issue, I think.
Yeah, and he's tough. I mean, talk about your difficult evaluations for next year. 32 home runs allowed in 161 and 2/3 innings for Joe Ryan last year. ERA swelled up to 4.51, and things started off really well. There was a point, I think it was in late June, Joe Ryan had a 2.98 ERA and a .91 WHIP. That was coming off of a complete game shutout with 9 Ks against the Red Sox on June 22nd. Things really, really turned after that for him.
Yeah, I could see a Severino or Frankie Montas type thing for the Twins where they're like, this is our shot at adding someone at the top. And then maybe at the back end, even someone as boring as Martin Perez. And I'm not trying to be rude to Martin
him back
Perez.
To Minnesota again.
But just like, put him on the 5. And if you don't like what you see anymore, then, you call up Sammy Woods Richardson or something, So that's like a budget version of my the fantasy thing where I want one of the upside bin and one of the innings bin.
I think they may be interested in some other guys that are kind of clustered with Maeda ADP wise. You got Michael Wacha in that range. Seth Lugo's in there. Those kind of seem like Twins guys that could end up being your third best starter if it works. And
Seth Lugo is legitimately my favorite remaining free agent starting pitcher in terms of how much I think it'll cost and how good he'll be. And I would give Seth Lugo. I wouldn't give Seth Lugo the full Sonny Gray money, but I would think of him in a similar way. Because think about it. What's the problem with Seth Lugo? You don't think the innings are going to be great, or you're worried about the innings. Well, you should be worried about the innings with Sonny Gray. What's the best thing about Seth Lugo? He can spin it, and he's got an elite breaking ball. I don't know. I think he's not that far off of Sonny Gray.
Man, I look at Lugo and I feel so much of a giant style contract for him, or 2 for 28, 3 for 40, something like that, or something with options built in, and it's within the range of outcomes, and depending on where he lands, still could be a really good reliever if it doesn't work as a starter. But it worked really well as a starter this year. That's a pretty good floor, and I think I'd rather go that route with Lugo than with Wacha, because I feel like we've had conversations about Michael Wacha, going back to previous podcasts we did at other jobs. Is this going to be the adjustment? Is this going to be the year?
Is Michael Wacha good? Is Joe Flacco elite of baseball?
Oh God, it is. It's thankfully, we don't have the Joe Flacco conversations going on anymore. But man, Wacha's still only 32 years old. This could be happening for 5 more years. But it's a guy that I've described him as a pitcher that everybody's interested in. He's pitched for 5 different teams the last 5 seasons, going from the Cards to the Mets to the Rays to the Red Sox to the Padres, showing some flashes, which keeps teams interested again. But
Seth Lugo is pitching all those places?
Wacha pitched in all those places. Lugo was just the 2 stops, I think, between the Mets and the Padres. I don't think he had a 3rd stop wedged in there.
I don't remember Seth Lugo with the Cardinals.
No, Seth Lugo has not pitched for the Cardinals.
Okay. Yeah. Michael Wacha, he's pitched all over. I kind of think of Michael Wacha almost in the Wade Miley bin, which is good changeup, has, cutter changeup. They have similar styles, cutter changeup, better than you might think when they're bad, and not as good as you think when they're coming off a good season.
Yeah, and I think when you look at the end of the season too, there's a few really nice starts from Wacha where he carved up a husk of a White Sox lineup, a Cardinals team that had given up by September. You can really get duped if you look at some of those final starts and kind of put those into the appropriate context. I think he's a useful pitcher. I just don't know if there's anything more than what we just saw from him.
Oh my goodness. Look at that. He's finished with the White Sox, Cardinals, and Rockies at home.
Yeah.
And his worst start in the last 4 was at LA. That's sort of amazing.
Yeah. So, the usual tread carefully applies. He'll do better than he would have done with that option for sure, and deservedly so, because the ratios have been good each of these last 2 seasons between the Red Sox and the Padres. But I think I'm with you as far as preferring Lugo to Wacha and being really curious as to what Lugo ends up getting as a free agent here this winter. Let's get to this trade, and this is not surprising at all. The Mariners made a trade. Eugenio Suárez goes to the D-backs as a part of this deal, and Carlos Vargas, kind of an interesting relief arm, and then Sebi Zavala, almost certainly the seldom used backup catcher for Cal Raleigh in 2024, going back to Seattle as a part of this deal.
Actually, the return is so light that I would say that this is it's not a salary dump, but they got something back, but it's like they didn't want to necessarily pay the salary for this type of production.
I think that's more or less why they made this move. But I also wondered, so we talked about Luis Urias in the last episode looking like a small slide platoon bat when Suarez was still on this depth chart, and thinking about how much they played him in 2023. I wonder if this puts the Mariners in the market for Matt Chapman or possibly Jeimer Candelario, who's sort of like everybody's fallback option at third base if they miss out on Chapman. Chapman, I think, is one of those guys that will end up being a solid free agent signing, even if the bat is slowly going into decline. We talked about it a lot at First Pitch Arizona. The quality of contact was there in terms of hard hit rate and barrel rate, but he was not pulling his barrels consistently. So if you believe that Matt Chapman can fix that, then the offense can come back in a huge way. And he's still a great defender at third base, which is part of why I think the multi-year 3-4 year deal for big money totally makes sense. Suarez is at least an upgrade for the Diamondbacks. You think about what they did at third base between Evan Longoria, Emmanuel Rivera. That group of third basemen, which includes a few other players that rotated through the spot, hit 234 with a 304 OBP and a 340 slug in 2023. They hit 10 home runs from that position. Suarez at least gives them thump at a minimum. Should be in the heart of that order. Like I feel like this is a pretty solid move for him. It gives him one more season to probably be an everyday player or very close to it. Maybe the complicating factor here is Jordan Lawler. If Jordan Lawler is up on the big league roster all season or for most of the season, Geraldo Perdomo is not going to go away. So you have to play him somewhere. So maybe that eats into Suarez's playing time a little, but they got some flexibility with DH. So all in all, I think this is kind of a big win for Suarez, even though the lineup context, the park, there might not be a massive upgrade there. The playing time just seems more stable for him now.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, with the sort of shape of the Diamondbacks minor leagues and what they've got going, if they shouldn't be considered a front runner for Eloy Jimenez in trade talks, because I don't love Jake McCarthy myself, but just looking at past deals, a deal with Jake McCarthy, and maybe even like put Dominic Fletcher in as well.
Yeah, of course.
Put Jake McCarthy and Dominic Fletcher together, and maybe some lower minors guys. And if you get Eloy Jimenez, then you're like, woof, like this is a legit thing. Now Perdomo and Lawler, like that's our safety blanket. We've got two athletic guys. Should we bring up Lawler and he plays third and Suarez plays DH and Eloy plays some outfield, or we just put Perdomo and Lawler on here, and every time Ketel Marte is hurt, we have a second baseman, or Perdomo, starts taking some center field reps so that we can, do things that way. Like, I don't know. I think I leave Perdomo and Lawler alone, and I say these guys are both going to help us next year, and then I can play around with the outfield a little bit and see if I can get more offense on this team. Because I think that's what they kind of need. I mean, I know they went to the World Series, but this wasn't like the best roster in the National League. No. So they need to keep improving.
And I think they will. I think they've got, between Lawler and the system's a little tricky to trade with right now, because a lot of the players that you might have wanted have graduated and are kind of a key part of what they're doing right now, mostly the young pitching. I don't know if they would move Tommy Troy. Drew Jones, of course, just had a brutal 2023 from like every possible facet. Would you trade Drew Jones away, kind of sell low via trade to add someone like Eloy Jimenez or add someone else? Maybe. That's kind of a fascinating path they could consider. But I think there's a few different ways you can upgrade this roster, and maybe not blocking the DH spot would be their best choice, given that Suarez is there. Because if you can use Suarez part-time at third base, the rest of the time at DH, and keep some of those younger, more athletic guys on the infield regularly, I think that gives you a better all-around starting nine most days.
Yeah, I mean, the good news about this team organizationally and in terms of the future is they're great at the middle. They seem to have found solutions up the middle. I'm counting Alek Thomas because I think defensively, at least, he's a plus in center, and he can at least hold water for them. But if you put Corbin in center, it hurts you arm-wise, but I think he can also play center. So, they seem pretty good up the middle. And what they need are, add some back-end starters, maybe have some of the guys they're developing turn out better, in terms of pitching development, maybe add to that bullpen. But these are things that, yes, every team's trying to do, but are not the hardest things in the world.
Yeah. Doable adjustments to continue getting better.
And I like Suarez. Suarez is better, just like you said, is a better solution for them at third.
Yeah. Not everyone can sign Matt Chapman. Not everyone can sign Jeimer Candelario. So just solving the problem without going into the free agent bin is probably a good move. So I'm curious to see just how it plays out for Suarez. I think what we saw last year, in 2023, I think it's a pretty good indication of where the projection should go for 2024. Low average, good OBP, not great OBP, big time power, pretty good run production, so long as he can avoid injuries. Max volume player. From a Oatmealy bargain bin corner infield perspective, I'm thinking about early drafts. I might do one next week while we're in Nashville. Maybe. But they're slow drafts. That's the problem. I don't want to do a slow draft. I want to sit down and just knock a draft out in 2.5 hours. Oatmealy corner infielders looking for thump. Suarez, Josh Bell, or Anthony Rizzo. Who do you like the most out of that trio right now? All three going after pick 250 in November drafts.
He might take Suarez. He has very established flaws in that strikeout rate. But with Rizzo's health, it's a pretty big question mark. Suarez also is in the middle of a park upgrade, and so even though Arizona is a neutral park, Seattle's one of the hardest places to hit. It's just cold, the ball doesn't travel as far. Although it's a dome, so why? That's not a good reason. It must just be dimensions or
atmospheric conditions.
Anyway, it plays. You can look at any park factor. It plays. It's a hard place to play. So I'll take Suarez.
I think I'd actually go Rizzo of that trio. For now, you're getting a little more of a discount on him. He's supposed to go through a normal offseason, of course. The concussion.
Nice park. He's demonstrated that he can hit there.
Yeah, basically hits second or third in that Yankees lineup. I think there's a little more there in terms of average because of the park. We saw some really good stuff from Rizzo before the concussion. He hit 304, 376, 505 with 11 homers the first 2 months of the season. Was not the same after that late May concussion. I think I'd go him out of that group because I think the power output's close for the group. Suarez probably
the batting
leads the group in homers, but yeah, you're going to give up a lot.
Batting average probably with him.
It's hard to get enough power with average that late in the draft too. So I think that's where Rizzo kind of jumps out to me. From a real life perspective, Suarez versus Jeimer Candelario. Who do you think actually has a better 2024? Is the better all-round fit?
Suarez is projected for 1.6 wins and Candelario 1.8, 1.9. Just looking away from the projections, defensively, I give it to Suarez. I think I feel like Candelario's almost got moved off the position in Detroit. He was playing first. So glove, I give Suarez. Kind of OBP skills, maybe a wash. Contact skills go to Candelario. Power goes to Suarez. So I think I know what the projections say, but I think I'd take Suarez.
Yeah, I think that's where I'm at for this year only. I think where it gets complicated is year 2, year 3. I think Candelario might be at that point where you can get a little more out of him for a few years. His offensive profile scares me less. I'm also curious to see, this is one of the park factors that doesn't get discussed probably as much as it should, is what happens with Suarez's K rate getting out of Seattle. Among the things that ballpark in Seattle does, the 3-year rolling average for the Mariners ballpark, T-Mobile Park, it's a 110 strikeout factor. It's tied for second with the Brewers. The only park that boosts strikeouts more Willie Adames is among the players that have talked about how difficult it is to
Tampa.
see the ball and hit there.
And he went to Milwaukee, who's number 2.
Yeah, Milwaukee's right there, tied for second with the Mariners. But the thing is, Chase Field has a 95 park factor for Ks. So it's a pretty big difference where, Suarez is likely a 30% K rate guy in a park like Seattle. Maybe you knock that down 28, 29%. It's only a handful of Ks over a season, but maybe it just helps him age a little more gracefully since the quality of the contact is still there. The swing decisions, he's not chasing pitches outside the zone at an alarming rate. He's still doing that at sort of a career norm sort of level. I wonder if just getting out of Seattle stabilizes his offensive profile for a little bit longer. There's a club option for 2025 on that deal, so it's possible
down
he's in
to
Arizona for
28
years.
Or something. 27. He's just reverses the aging for a year or two.
Yeah, nudges the average up 8 to 10 points or something in the process. On the margins, it matters. I just thought
it's just a weird thing, the idea of park factors for strikeouts. You'd think that strikeouts are very, the pitcher and the catcher and what's the park going to do. But these things are mostly accounted for. It's, there are, I will say this, I do think there are park factors for strikeouts. I think that exists. And I think that the reason it exists is multifaceted. You've got the batter's eye. So behind the pitcher, there's different colored materials. Some people have ivy. Some people allow people to sit closer to the batter's eye. And so I think in Houston, that was a deal where there's actually a people seated kind of close to where the ball comes out from the pitcher's hand. And so the reason you have the batter's eye is to give a background for that. You're looking for the ball release. The batter's eye is one of the ways. Pitchers brought up just last year to me that mounds are different. Mm-hmm. I don't know if mounds can be really different if MLB is on top of policing these things, but their subjective feel almost becomes more important than the reality. Because if you're standing on a mound, and they said some of it was how much space there is behind home plate. So do you feel like you're on top of home plate, or do you feel like, oh, this is a big park? And do you like it if it's a big park? You know what I mean? So how they feel on the mound is one thing. Lighting is one. When we talked to Willie Adames, he said that they had LED lighting. And that was something that Matt Olson said too, is that when you have LED lighting, you kind of, there's a shadow on the ball almost. And it's almost like you only see the top half of the ball lit up, and the bottom half is kind of shadowy. Whereas more ambient kind of sun-based lighting, maybe that doesn't happen as much. I don't know. Maybe different kinds of lights give different shadows. So anyway, it's about the batter's perception and the pitcher's perception of that space that they're in. And I do believe that it can lead to some parks just being an easier place to strike out.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Those 3 parks, the Trop, American Family Field, T-Mobile Park, they all have roofs. And I think for the most, the Tropicana Field, that's not retractable. That's always closed. American Family Field, rarely open because of the weather. And
Arizona, rarely open.
There are clouds 120 miles away. Keep the roof shut. Come on.
Arizona, it's 125 degrees today.
Yeah, so I just wonder, and the odd thing is, the strikeouts are less of a problem there. I'd be curious to know if the lighting in the ballpark is something that's actually very different between those two places, given the extremes in that particular park factor. But again, a park factor that I had not thought much about, I think, until it was actually Todd Zola who brought it up to me a few years ago. When Garrett Cole went from Pittsburgh to Houston, there was a pretty big swing just in the strikeout park factors between those two places. And I was like, what are you talking about, Todd? That's not a thing. And went through it. It was like, yeah, that actually is a thing. We should pay closer attention to it because it can actually make a difference, especially for pitchers moving in from one good spot to a bad spot. Worst place for K's, of course, Coors Field. Not a surprise, right? But
yes, I hadn't talked about
it's atmospheric conditions, right? The way your pitches move can change from
can affect your and maybe that's why the domes are. You're saying they're good for strikeouts. Maybe
boost K's. Yeah.
Think about pitch design. Think about pitch design, modern pitch design. You're trying to hit certain movement patterns, right? And you're like, I want this to move like this and this and this. Well, what happens in a dome? You kind of the pitches move the way you expect them to, because there's no atmospheric interference.
It's more consistency, yeah.
Right. So maybe that favors the pitcher, because the pitcher's like, oh yeah, I did get the plus, 18, and I got the -5, and got all the different movement patterns he wanted. So I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah. So more park factors chatter throughout the offseason. And speaking of Seattle, we were talking a lot about George Kirby from the First Pitch Arizona, and I get the sense that Kirby is going to be that early round pitcher that creeps up and creeps up and creeps up. And by the time you get to March, if you're playing in a very competitive league, high stakes league, whatever it might be, it's going to take even more to get George Kirby then than it does right now. And he's not cheap right now, to be clear.
I mean, he's going to maybe end up top 10. And
yeah, very good chance he's top 10 among starters ADP wise, because he's like kind of on the cusp of that already. Why do we love Seattle pitchers? Like, part of it is the park factors, right? They're good pitchers, but they're also in a good environment, a great environment for pitching, given that it suppresses homers, but it also boosts strikeouts. And you take the skills they have, you take the quality of the team they have, you take the quality of the bullpen they have, all of the secondary factors are also good behind them. I was starting to think that you could, with the right sort of roster construction opportunity, mostly like an auction salary cap draft situation, you could probably stack Seattle pitching. Couldn't do it in a snake because Luis Castillo is going at the end of round 2 right now in a 15-team league. Kirby's going at the end of 3, so you have to push Kirby all the way to the beginning of 3 if you want to do it. But I don't think it's a bad idea. I think it's such a great place to pitch. All those factors are in place right now where you could end up with their 3 best starters, and you might be really happy with how your roster plays out over the course of the year if you're thinking about going aggressive early with pitching anyway.
Yeah, I mean, the entire rotation last year was 4th in ERA with a 3.89 ERA, and good peripherals to boost to support it, and that includes starts that you wouldn't have to include necessarily in your fantasy situation, because it includes starts from Trent Thornton and Tommy Malone and 10 starts from Marco Gonzalez with a 5.22 ERA that you wouldn't necessarily start on your team. So yeah, if you paired it down to Castillo, Kirby, Gilbert, and Wu, you'd probably have something like a 3.4, 3.5 ERA in the next year. Bryce Miller, a lot of strikeouts.
You're Wu over Miller choosing between those two, right? Because they're going around the same time, like in that 180 to 200 range.
Yeah, I think so, because I love Bryce Miller's 4-seam, but the rest of the package he's still trying to figure it out. And I love both of them, but he still hasn't. Right now, he's this strange 4-seam cutter and uses the sweeper as like to steal strikes. So it's like, really, he's a 4-seam cutter guy with a sideways curveball he uses sometimes. And Brian Wu, you look at him and you think, oh, he's a 2-pitch pitcher, but he's actually a 4-seam, 2-seam sinker. He's a 4-seam, 2-seam sweeper gyro slider guy. So he in fact has 4 pitches. And I think that he's almost at a better place in terms of figuring out how to place those, like use those 4 pitches in tandem. Whereas, like if you're selling me on a fastball cutter guy, I'm like, I don't know. It's almost like it's a very Strider-esque like kind of attempt.
Yeah, and that's a fine line to walk. We've talked about how often Strider gets away with missing in the heart of the zone. It takes a ridiculous fastball to be able to do that. And I don't think
maybe Bryce Miller has that.
Does he have that good of a fastball?
Well, we did have a question about fastball shape, and the interesting thing for him is, the one thing that's annoying is you're going to go to Brooks Baseball, you're going to go to Savant, you're going to go to Alex Chamberlain's, pitcher leaderboard on Tableau. But all those are great places to go. But if you do those things, then each of them is going to have a different way of describing movement. So, if you go to Brooks, you look at Bryce Miller's, fastball movement. This is Brooks Baseball. You can see that he has a 9.9 inch vertical movement on a 95 mile per hour fastball. So 9 is about average. So already he's got above average vertical movement. Then you can look over at the vertical release column and see, oh, he has a sub 6 foot release point. So now you're saying, okay, this is a guy who releases the ball from a lower release point and has above average ride. That's a really good combo. So that's a way you could look at Brooks and see it. Another way you can do it is you can go over at Baseball Savant and you can see Bryce Miller. They have some color coded stuff. So this is probably an easier way to understand things, but you can look at what they've got here, the vertical movement and horizontal movement. They've got it color coded. So you can look at his four seamer and see, oh, he's got 3 inches of vertical movement over average given his release point. I think they consider a release point, but he's got 3 inches of vertical movement, and it's helpful because it got a nice bright red coloring. And you say, oh, that's good. I know that is good. And then, if you're talking like, induced vertical break, which is IVB, which is sort of pitching coach talk, you can go over to Alex Chamberlain's pitcher. It's called like a pitch leaderboard. He's got this is pitch leaderboard version 5, and you can go to specs and you can do something like sort for vertical break. And here on his, I know that he has actually looked at vertical. He's adjusted for release point. And again, the number is going to be totally different. So it was a 9.9 on Brooks. It was an 11.9 on Baseball Savant. And Bryce Miller is 18.4 induced vertical break. Now, anything above 18 is good. He's got this induced vertical break of 18.4, and he's got the low release point. So that's another way to understand shape. But when we talk about fastball shape, we're talking about sort of the geometric shape from release to the plate. And like the good fastballs have a straight line almost. In terms of watching it, it's super hard. It's super hard because you're watching mostly for like batter reactions. It's really hard to tell, but I guess sometimes you can tell that like the ball kind of went straight as opposed to like went down. But it's really hard, especially if they're like going to different locations at the plate and stuff, but I think it's super hard to scout with your eyes. And I tend towards, if you can't measure it, you don't know it. And I'm biased in that direction. What I would love is if all the people could get together and just have one number for us. That would be great.
That would help. That would help. Would help many of us understand it a little better and to know, oh, I'm on this leaderboard and it means the same as the other leaderboard because there's a standard, but because there's a different point that those are all based off of, you have these extra complications. So like what types of shape are best? Well, ride is always good. Like that's something we've talked about for a long time. Part of what makes, I think for me, seeing ride on television difficult, you get different camera angles. Mm-hmm. And, with pitchers throwing on a mound, like there's kind of an illusion to it. I think the way you described it, like good ride is more like what looks like a straight fastball on TV is actually good ride. But if you were sitting behind the plate, the perspective is different. And I don't know if a straight fastball in person probably isn't as good. Probably doesn't have as much ride as you think. So it's like where you're watching the game also kind of impacts what it's going to look like while you're trying to watch fastball movements. I find that to be really challenging as well.
Yeah, I mean, watch a Joe Ryan fastball. It is a great pitch, and it also is a pitch that he uses over and over in the top of the zone that people hit for homers. So, if you're like eye scouting, you'd be like, he didn't have a good fastball. I just saw him give up a homer, and it's just like all these straight things at the top of the zone. Well, yeah, I mean, it's pretty good, and he uses it so much that yes, people do hit homers off it. So I find it hard to see some of this stuff with my eyes, and that's why I respect, the heck out of scouts. Like I'm looking at the numbers because it's it's better than me trying to be like, oh yeah, like this guy's cut of his jib.
The job is really hard, by the way. Like everyone knows, but it's a very, very difficult job. So thank you for that question.
One thing I would say that I like about Savant and about Alex Chamberlain's thing is it gives you a sense of where they sit. Like anything that's like extreme, anything that's at the top of a leaderboard or at the bottom of a leaderboard is usually good, and because you're just not in the middle of the leaderboard. And so when you go over to Alex Chamberlain's leaderboard, you can sort. And I just did minimum 500 fastballs, sort by ride. There's Bryce Miller in the top 20, and most of the pitchers with fastballs in that top 20, like Felix Bautista is number 1. Christian Javier is right there by Bryce Miller. So usually it means that it's a good fastball, and you can kind of do some like comping there where you look at the release point, you look at the movement. And if you look at Savant, it says how much percentage better than average that number is. So getting a sense of like anything so sometimes good shape can just be something that's just totally different. Look at Yenier Cano's sinker, and you sort different leaderboards, and you'll be like, wow, it has like the most sink of any sinker. That's probably good. It's probably a good pitch.
Yeah, at the very least, the ends of the leaderboard are going to give you some reasons to dig into some videos. Like, hey, wait, what's going on here? What happens when this pitch is thrown? What did it do for results? What did it do for whiffs? How do hitters react to this pitch? I think that'd be the thing you'd start to look at, trying to pair what the leaderboards, what the numbers say versus like what your eyes tell you when it comes to fastball shape and effectiveness. But thanks a lot for that question, Isaac. I think at some point in the future, what we would like to do, again, we're people that have a lot of ideas in those ideas folders, to have some visuals to go along with a conversation like this for YouTube. That's something we think we should make. I think there's an appetite for that, because I think we're all trying to see it and understand it better than just have to go, oh, this is great. The numbers say it's great. It's like, well, yeah, but we want to see it. We want to be able to verify with our eyes that this is as effective and good as the numbers say that it is. Got a couple odds and ends here. I'm just going to get to one, because we had a question from Ryan about Shota Imanaga, and his posting is happening soon. I think last update I saw was like in the coming days. So paperwork is in process.
Yeah, I think the news today is that he's posted.
There. So he's going to be on his way. The question from Ryan was, is there concern that the stuff plus hype for Imanaga is too high, considering he was working in a different role? He wasn't necessarily working as a regular starter. The best stuff number in the World Baseball Classic, right? And then there's all the other differences. We talked about players coming over from Japan where the baseball's different. So how well does the stuff he have in his arsenal right now, how does that translate against big league hitters right now out of the box? Like, what are your expectations for Imanaga compared to the other free agent pitchers that we're looking at in this class?
Yeah. The question was right to point out that he kind of, Shota Imanaga pitched in kind of a hybrid role, was not kind of going 6 innings with this stuff plus, and that that points to the sample. I think in the sample I had 88 pitches from Shota Imanaga and 60 from Yoshinobu Yamamoto, and he beat Yoshinobu Yamamoto by 2 points. Also, while being in this sort of hybrid reliever type role that's going to increase your velo, pointing out that he was 93-ish in the WBC, but 91.8 in the regular season. That does point to some of why Imanaga is going to get less, as well as the age factor. There's a 5-year difference between them. So, that's big part of why Imanaga is going to get less. The reason why I still find it intriguing is a couple parts. One, let's say you give him, I don't think it's fair to give him that stuff plus as a reliever, because it still was 88 pitches in 3 appearances. So that's okay. So that's 30 pitches. That's a little bit more than your average reliever is more like, like 15 pitches, 20 pitches. So a little bit more. But let's say you do give him the full reliever thing. The reliever to starter conversion that I found and has been true for Drew Rasmussen and other people in the past has been about 5 points of stuff plus. Even if you wanted to be aggressive and say it's 7 or 8, you would still end up with Shota Imanaga having a better stuff plus than Yu Darvish and Sandy Alcantara and Christian Javier in the World Baseball Classic. So I think it's still super interesting. He's got great pitch movement numbers. He had amazing numbers in NPB last year. I mean, better strikeout minus walk numbers than Yoshinobu Yamamoto, Shota Imanaga did. So there's a lot of things that are good for him in terms of, what's it going to look like at 91.8. Maybe Nestor Cortez's four seam, goes 91.6 miles an hour, has 19 vertical IVB. Maybe he could be Nestor Cortez-esque. And if you took Nestor Cortez and put him in a different park, I think he'd have some pretty good numbers. And he had a good year for New York in 2022. So I'm not saying that they fit all the way. In fact, I would say that Imanaga is probably going to be better than Cortez because Imanaga comes with plus secondaries as well, whereas Cortez, it's like the cutter is his best second pitch.
Yeah, so. I like Imanaga's going in the 250 range of November drafts because, again, not knowing where he's pitching, not knowing park factors yet, that's a pretty big question. If he does end up in Yankee Stadium, then the excitement level is a little bit less. Only a slight jump from where he's going. But he seems like he's undervalued because you're looking at, this is below, we talked I think in the last episode about McKenzie and Andrew Abbott, some of those guys going in the post 200 range. Imanaga's going in the Reese Olson, Nick Lodolo, Christopher Sanchez, Reed Detmers.
I mean, there's a lot of guys I like down there. Those are some good names, but I would love to get 2 or 3 out of that group because I feel like all of them have jobs, are going to give you innings, and if they pop and they're good, then you keep them on your roster, and if they're not, you're streaming. You're picking up the next guy.
Yeah, and if you
good place to shop.
If you jumped him up to the early range of where he's going, it'd be stuff like Imanaga versus Bailey Ober, Sale and Carlos Rodon right there in the pick 180 range. I've made these mistakes so many times. Don't do it again.
And this is where I would say be careful. You can push a guy too hard. Yes, I'm excited about Shota Imanaga, but would I take him over? What was the first name you said?
That was
Bailey Ober.
Ober, yeah. Ober, Sale, Rodon would be kind of the.
I don't know. I mean, it's still an okay place to shop, but I'm sure the names above that are more established, and and you're gonna say no to Chris Sale over Shota Imanaga. I don't know. I had a lot of flyers on Chris Sale in 2023. Yes, but you have to remember painful. You cannot put someone in the do not draft box just because you're angry.
Oh, I'm not angry. I'm just disappointed.
Just disappointed. Oh, that's a parent line.
I've had that one ready since the first time my parents told me they were disappointed in me. It's oh, that's so much worse than you being mad at me.
Yeah.
Just.
Sale got his strikeout and walk numbers right last year, 29% and 6% and 7%.
Yeah, I mean, if you just say, he wasn't great in terms of homers again, which has been the case most of the time he's been in Boston.
Because the velo has dropped in Boston, yeah.
Yeah, so that's worked against him. Pretty bad numbers in terms of left on base percentage too. Looking at that, he's just under 70% last year. Career 76.9. So maybe some bad luck in that regard too. You can start to explain
Boston
why
bullpen.
The ERA came in a little high.
Boston bullpen maybe a little.
How many innings though for Sale? I think it's appropriate that Sale and Rodon are right next to each other because there are huge questions about their innings. Talent, no doubt, but range of outcomes is extremely wide for both.
What can you expect inning-wise from Imanaga?
Yeah, I was looking at his workloads too. I mean, it was 148 plus 11 more. So yeah, he's right in right around the 160 mark is usually where he ends up.
I suppose I might trust him to have more innings than those other two guys. I mean, I was going to put Rodón and Sale around the over-under around 140.
If you get 140 from those guys, you're pretty happy. Man,
Rodón seems like really like it's. I think like putting a number like 140 out there almost doesn't make sense. It's like it's going to be like 50 or it's going to be 180.
Look, I know reading numbers on the podcast is not a great. Last year,
time for reading numbers.
Great segment. This is an award-winning podcast because they read numbers as well as anybody. 64 and a third in year one with the Yankees, 178 in his only year with the Giants in 2022. 132 and 2/3 coming back off of major injuries with the White Sox. Only 7 and 2/3 in the lost season. Whatever, throw that away. 34 and 2/3 in 2019, 120 and 2/3 back in 2018, 69 and a third back in 2017, and a couple full-ish seasons with 165 and 139 and a third way back.
I'm surprised they gave him $162 million over 6 years.
I mean,
is this how we're going to look at the Blake Snell deal later?
Even Blake Snell's injury history isn't this better. Rodón, I'm glad he got paid. He's a great pitcher. He's been through a ton health-wise. Like to see him get back and to get to that level again was great. I guess the other problem with Rodón versus Sale, when we saw Rodón this year, it just wasn't working the same way, right? The K rate was down, home run rate was way up. I'm not saying that's who he is, but I think your proof of concept on Chris Sale that there's still a very good pitcher there through the things he's gone through. You have more to lean on with Sale than you do with Rodón.
Yeah.
Brutal. So if I'm choosing today, I'm choosing Sale between the two at the price, and I'm hopefully learning my lesson with the guys that have dealt with devastating injuries and missed a lot of time, because that group in particular has been tough for me in the last year or so. You got anything else on your mind before we go?
No, I wonder, now we've had a lot of the mid-level deals go, and I'm looking at this list of available pitchers, and it's Blake Snell and Shohei Ohtani, and then it's just a lot of kind of sorting through the 1 and 2 year deals. Maybe Lugo gets 3, maybe Giolito gets 3, but like I think it's going to be a lot of 1 and 2 year deals after that. Maybe Stroman gets 3, Eduardo Rodriguez is going to get 3, Jordan Montgomery. But I'm not as excited about those names. I'm excited about Snell and Ohtani to figure out what that's going to happen there. So it seems to me we've, in a weird way, the middle class has signed out first, and so now we get maybe a winter meetings full of all the top names: Yoshinobu Yamamoto, Blake Snell, Shohei Ohtani, bing, bang, boom. Maybe a Soto trade. Maybe
some bats too, man. Get a few of the position players going between Bellinger, Chapman, Rhys Hoskins. Love to see where those guys start to go. That'd be great. I think we're lining up for a good meetings as far as some things happen, just because we're getting big enough moves now. The seal has been broken. Teams are actively trying to get deals done, even if they're wondering what's going to happen with the very top guys. I think you nailed that a little bit earlier on.
And we saw some trades that sort of set the groundworks for later. Like, for example, the Braves clearing out all the players. That was an arbitration, but it was also roster spots. So they're in a good spot for, I think, a Dylan Cease trade. Might make a lot of sense for them because they don't have their, according to whatever their rubric is, I don't know if they have a ton more money, but they do have assets. They do have roster spots. So, I could see a Cease trade happening there. We've seen some other teams kind of, even something as small as the San Diego trade for Scott Barlow for Yera de los Santos. Like that saved them $6 million. That's part of their work for, are we going to trade Soto, or are we going to try and find 3 starting pitchers for like $15 million?
Yeah, I think they can actually find 3 starters for $15 million. I don't know if those starters will be healthy and productive all season, but I think they can do it.
I mean, there seems to be like a fair amount of supply at the bottom of the market. If they want to go with Alex Wood and Hyunjin Ryu and Wade Miley, they might, and they could strike gold. I mean, you might laugh at some of those names I just throw out there, but like, was Seth Lugo, was that Seth Lugo, Michael Wacha last year? That was, from the same bin.
That's why I think they might be able to get away with it. They just did it last year, and why break up this band if you don't have to? If you can find a way to keep it together for one more year, I think you try to keep it together for one more year.
Especially given there is some upper minor strengths in pitching. I don't know. I don't have movement numbers on these guys, so I can't fully form an opinion, but the minor league pitcher of the year was in Double-A, and Snelling is right there. So like he was the minor league pitcher of the year, I think. So you've got some young arms, so you could just buy some older arms, and if they go bad, hopefully one of those guys is ready.
Yeah, could go young if they have to. Once they get to at least the early, I don't know, like the early part of the summer, maybe is when we'll start to see some of those prospects get a look if they can find a way to keep it afloat in the rotation. Until then, we're going to go. And as a result of the turkey tips, we gave you extra time at the back. So, sorry for the turkey tips. If you didn't want those, we'll try to save them again for pre-Thanksgiving. They're a little more helpful, I think, going into holiday than coming out of the holiday. But sometimes you get the debrief to really know like what worked this year, what went well, what didn't go well. If you hear this on Monday, Cyber Monday, the 27th of November, still have the $1 a month deal at theathletic.com/rates and barrels. That goes away at the end of the night. So be sure to get that as soon as possible. If you don't have a subscription already, you can find Eno on Twitter at Unosaris. You can find me at Derek Van Riper. If you got a question for a future episode, ratesandbarrels@gmail.com is the best way to send those our way. That's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We're back with you next week.
Thanks for listening.